It's the final battle. They're going after Trump, but if they can get Trump, it means they can get you, they can get me, they can get all of us. He is standing in the way, and that can sound like a campaign slogan, but it's very true. Now we're approaching the most important battle of when we get back power, I don't really want to have peace with these people who did this to us and are continuing to do this to us. We have to turn the tables on them, give them a dose of their own medicine, and then we can even the playing field, and then we can discuss unity.
Well, hello everyone, and we lost our guest. Oh well, he'll be back.
Well, no, he's here. Hold on.
Oh, my bad.
You there, Robert?
Hey, Kyle here. I'm Kyle, and welcome to the end game. And so I wasn't expecting that. And we have Robert Kraft, and we have our wonderful Kelly. And tonight we have a really awesome show for you tonight. It's really going to be enlightening. There's a lot of information, and it's going to tie into participants in the program of the Super Bowl and the participants in that. And yes, it is a program because we have known in the past that it is all part of their plan, and it is entertainment. So it's wonderful to think that all that stuff is real, but it's not. It's for show. And it's all part of what's being put into the plan right now. And Robert's going to explain how that works and as far as how those pieces come together. We saw at the beginnings of the year when the football game was very important, whenever the military took the field and did those things. All of this is very important on actually setting precedents to jurisdictions. And this is very important of what's actually taking place right now. And I'm going to let the man that knows more about it than I do. I understand it, but he's going to be the one who talks about it. And so before we do that, we're going to pray and then we're going to get started. Because as you can tell, I'm kind of excited about this because this is a really good topic that we're going to talk about tonight. Here we go. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. Lord, we just ask that you continually let your love shine upon everyone, Father, that no one goes without knowing how much you truly love each and every one of us. And it's not based on what we do, what we say, how we act. You love us unconditionally. And Father, we thank you for that. We thank you that there is nothing that we can do to separate ourselves from you and the love that you have for us. Father, we thank you. We praise you and we ask for protection over our leaders, President Donald Trump, and all of the military, those things that they're doing in the public view, as well as those things that are unseen, as you move unseen in so many people's lives right now. Father, we just want to thank you for it. We thank you that you place a hedge of protection around this call, everyone is on it, and just continually watch over us and protect us for those things that we see, those things that we don't see, that you're always there watching out for us and pushing us in the right direction. We thank you, we praise you, we magnify your name because it's all about what you're doing in our lives. And we thank you that you're allowing us to participate in this great event that's taken place in all of history, really. It's setting something that is going to define time. And we thank you so much for it. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 All right. So, Robert, what you been up to, buddy?
Man, it has been busy. I have not been able to put any vaults in because I've been working on all of this infrastructure stuff. And can you guys hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, good. So I've been putting in all this infrastructure stuff down in Florida, and I actually so I came to a revelation that really was like a dual revelation. First I figured out one thing, and then it kind of turned everything on top of itself, and it started with the whole Gasparilla and the pirate thing that went on, right? So that what I came to understand was there's only one day a year that the pirates are on the land, and they are the authority having jurisdiction on the land, and that is the Gasparilla in Tampa, Florida. So the pirates come to land one day a year, and they are given the key to the city, and they are the authority having jurisdiction for one day. Okay,
Really?
so yes, what's really interesting about the Gasparilla is that the Gasparilla attaches to Gasparilla Island, which is Boca Grande, Florida, which is at Boca Grande, Florida, which is where the CSX Railroad offloaded all of the residential properties to foreign lands. All the land and everything was offloaded out of what's called Boca Bay. So when I found this out, I was like, well, wait a minute. If the game's playing the way we think it does, then you got to become a pirate. So I had to go to Gasparilla. So I went to Gasparilla, and I went to the port, and I had to stand on the land, because then you are consenting to the pirates having the authority to have jurisdiction. And then that had to go back to the Gasparilla Lighthouse, which is in the center point of Boca Grande, Boca Grande on Gasparilla Island. That brings the pirates, Jose Gaspar's pirates. Now they have a lighthouse to return to their land as the rightful heirs. Now, this ties back to in 1949, the Red Cross declaration that all armed forces of the United States members are either wounded, injured, or shipwrecked. So it goes all the way back to the end of World War II. Okay? This is how they parked them in America. And then later on in 1969, they passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act separated all armed forces members from the public. So they were not considered the public, but there was no organized formation of law in the private sector. So they were lost at sea, is the best way to say it. They were lost at sea. So whenever they came back, they were put back in statutory law, which was our foreign federal law that was in place with our foreign federal courts and our foreign state courts, civil courts, and we could not get back to our home of record. So we were POW MIA in transit. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And so how does, because I have it queued up now because we went there right off the bat.
Sorry.
No. It was like, it just happened. I told you that I was going to let it go how it was going to go, right? And it just went right down that vein. So, I knew it was going to happen. So that's why I brought it up. So anyway, let's talk about that because I want to bring it up real quick and show how the Jolly Roger, which I'm fully aware of what that flag actually means, being a captain, being out on the water, and that ship's flag is something that they communicate with. That's how they talk. That's how they declarate who they're actually flagged to. Like a ship is flagged to a specific country. That's why they talk about it in flags. And so let me go ahead and play this video, the one that's linked to the one that you had real quick, and then I'll let you explain it from there. And let me share screen real quick and bring that up, the sound. And here we go. This is the Jolly Roger with the U.S. Naval Destroyer, the USS Kidd.
All military warships display a flag linked to piracy and unruliness. The guided missile destroyer USS Kidd DDG-100 stands out as an exceptional warship. So, why does this warship have this flag on her? We must have to travel back to December 7, 1941 for that. That day, Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd was the commander of Battleship Division 1 at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Amidst the Japanese assault, Kidd promptly shifted his attention to the bridge of his flagship, the USS Arizona BB-39, in order to assume command of his battleships. Unfortunately, the battleship was targeted by Japanese launched torpedoes and bombs, and Admiral Kidd met his demise. His death marked the highest-ranking casualty at Pearl Harbor, making him the first U.S. Navy flag officer to lose his life in World War II. In 1943, the first USS Kidd, a Fletcher-class destroyer, was commissioned, and her crew quickly embraced both the skull and crossbones motif and the overall pirate theme, as well as the moniker the Pirates of the Pacific. Remarkably, they received authorization from the U.S. Navy. In exchange for a substantial payment, or ransom, of ice cream, they started rescuing downed military aviators and returning them to their respective aircraft carriers. In 1981, the USS Kidd DDG-993, a new destroyer, entered service and assumed the responsibility of raising the Jolly Roger until Taiwan received it in 1998. The modern USS Kidd likewise embraced this age-old concept upon its commissioning in 2007. The pirate flag is displayed not only upon entering and exiting the port, but also during the international drills. Aside from the flag, the symbol can also be observed on another part of the warship, notably on the rear of the ship's Mark 45 5-inch cannon, which prominently displays the pirate flag. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are named for many U.S. Navy leaders and heroes, but the USS Kidd and her successor destroyer will always be the sole ship to fly the Jolly Roger due to their unique history.
So with that,
that's not exactly true.
So that's where I want you to bring in the correction to this, because this is where we're going with actual truth, right? Not what is out there as in the narrative, so to speak, right? So
Correct.
floor's yours, buddy.
Okay, so the USS Kidd flies the Jolly Roger because the USS Kidd is holding the spirit of Admiral Kidd at maritime law, and that is the commander of the battleship Arizona, correct? You just said
Yes.
that, right? Here's the key. When we're at peace, the battleships are considered maritime law. Okay?
Yes.
But when we are at war, the US Coast Guard aligns to the battleships as a capital ship, and the battleship and the Coast Guard go to sea to put to dry dock.
Yes.
Okay?
So that's why when people have asked, how does the United States Coast Guard actually operate in foreign international waters as under their coastal authority? Because that's what they actually have, is coastal
That's
maritime
correct.
authority. But we are actually at war, and at war we are actually, the United States Coast Guard operates under the naval jurisdiction. They actually operate out of the naval bases. Naval bases actually, I mean, the Navy actually goes to the Coast Guard bases, and they are actually one almost entity at that point. Go ahead.
That would be true. That would be true. That is true. When you are in foreign jurisdiction.
Yes.
However, we are no longer in foreign jurisdiction. We have set the perimeter of the United States at the Western Hemisphere. So anything that happens inside is domestic law enforcement. Now, here's the kicker. And I didn't know this until I figured out all this stuff about the Jolly Roger and Jose Gaspar and all this other stuff. And then I realized what the U.S. Coast Guard really is. The U.S. Coast Guard is at Admiralty. They are not at maritime, but they are only at Admiralty when they are on a sea base and they have the U.S. Marine Corps on their boats. And when the U.S. Marine Corps goes on to a U.S. Coast Guard boat on the water, they sponsor the Coast Guard boat to Admiralty law. And that is why they separated the Marines and the Coast Guard. The Marine Sea Division is supposed to be on Coast Guard cutters. And the reason they're supposed to be on, so here's the interesting part. And we backtracked and researched this whole thing. We found the one base in the Western Hemisphere that actually has the Marines and the Coast Guard in one place. We found it, and I went there. It is BSA Sea Base, Summerlin Key, in the Florida Keys. That is where the Marines and the Coast Guard are operating together. It's the only place that they're operating together in the Western Hemisphere. Okay? So that base is at Admiralty. All right? We need Admiralty law because Admiralty law is where cargo comes off of the maritime onto the land, and it becomes cargo instead of freight. Okay?
Yep.
And it actually touches the land. The reason that this has happened is because Congress went and separated the Marine Corps Sea Division, putting them with the Navy, and put the Coast Guard on the water and made it so that the Coast Guard could never go to sea because they need the Marines to sponsor them to go to sea. And that's how we get to the seas. So the Navy is maritime law. The Coast Guard is Admiralty. And that's our problem. We don't have any Admiralty courts because we don't have any courts where the Marines and the Coast Guard are together. Until Monday. Monday, we'll have a court.
Yes.
So
And so leading into that very thing, all right, so there was a post and this guy did it on and you had it put over to your page and this guy actually put this together by the Patriots and Seattle Seahawks
oh yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm going to bring that up real quick and give the guy credit that actually posted this initially and here it is. Okay,
Yep.
so basically, it's got the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks. New England Patriots equal common law of the land versus Seattle Seahawks equals Admiralty maritime law. And how does that fit into what we're talking about right now? And then I have something that I'm going to play right after that because it was really coincidental, not really, because there are no coincidences, that here, let me
NBC's Providence, Rhode Island.
bring this up real quick and then I'll play this. Kelly put this together the other day and really awesome. And we'll listen to this. It's like 45 seconds.
So let me
This is
just explain that the night before I put this together, it was the opening for Melania's movie at the Kennedy Center. And there was a picture of Trump standing with the owner of the Patriots. So then the next day, I found this video.
yes, which is kind of ironic that not only is he with him, but then also his plane ended up in Gitmo same time, and now they're also in the Super Bowl that we just discussed about the programming that this entertainment is bringing forth. But it's also got more to do with setting up jurisdictions, and I'm going to let Robert speak about that after we play this video real quick.
NBC's Providence, Rhode Island affiliate is reporting a New England Patriots team plane recently made a trip to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. That's according to flight records. The purpose of the trip remains unclear, but the infamous U.S. military base is now used by the Trump administration as a detention center for deportees and immigrants. The Patriots own 2 planes available for charter, and team owner Robert Kraft has previously used them for personal projects, including aid missions. Flight records show that one of the Patriots planes departed from Perro Field Fort Worth Alliance Airport in Texas around 6 a.m. local time Monday and arrived at Guantanamo Bay a few hours later.
So, how does this potentially tie into what we were just talking about and about what may be or may not be happening as of Monday?
Well, really interesting. So Fort Worth Alliance, right? That's the Declaration of Independence, right? To contract
Right.
alliances, okay? And it goes down to Guantanamo Bay. The reason Guantanamo Bay is important is because that is where they exiled the Marines out of Brooklyn and they closed the terminal. And that's where they locked them. They locked them at Guantanamo Bay. So what it sounds like is the Marine Corps C Division is flying to the Super Bowl to meet up with the Seahawks in San Francisco Bay. And when they take the field together, that will put the Coast Guard, who is the Seahawks, with the Marine Corps C Division, establishing Admiralty law or opening the door so that an Admiralty law court jurisdiction can now operate in North America.
Yes, within the Western Hemisphere.
Because we need the Admiralty. So we've been talking about like you have to start up, you have to activate the amendments in order, right? You have to go, we did Amendment 1, right? And then we put in Armory or what's called a bear-in for Amendment 2. And then we got to Amendment 3, and that was housing and quartering. Okay. And then we had to put in housing and quartering for the Army Air Corps, but we had to give quartering and assistance to the Navy under maritime. So we've done that. We put all those things in place, but we need the Admiralty to get the cargo off of the Navy ships onto the land. So we need an Admiralty court, because that's what Admiralty does. Admiralty deals with the cargo, not the vessel, not the ship. So that's the next part, is we have to give, I have to decide, I have to figure out if it's housing and quartering or quartering only. But I'm pretty sure it's housing and quartering to the Coast Guard. When they are with Marine Corps Sea, they can be housed and quartered together and provide assistance. And then I have to, and then when I install that general order, or it's not called a general order anymore, under Article 2, under Article 3, Amendment 3, it is called a proscription. There are proscriptions by law. So proscription, so when federal government recognized my LLB, which is my Bachelor of Laws in English Common Law, right? They actually, and my ministry, they international ministry, they actually opened the door for me to professionally write proscriptions by law. And that is because we're at war, and that is what the Amendment 3 says. It says during a time of war as proscribed by law. So I have to write proscriptions granting certain capacity, certain things that is within the scope of our trust, so we can give them to them. They still have to accept them. They still have to take it and use it however they can. But if we don't grant it, if we don't give them the capacity to do it, they can't just take it. And that's been the hard part, is figuring out, what do you grant, what don't you grant? What do you give instruction on, what don't you? How do you open these doors up? So we've had to start this process of issuing proscriptions, which is Amendment 3. When the Admiralty Court comes online, that will be Amendment 4. Amendment 4 is due process of law. Once we get to Amendment 4, we have hit Admiralty. Once an Admiralty court's in, due process of law is now on the seaside in equity. It's the equitable seaside law. So it's not on the land, but it's on the it's at the dock on the seaside, and it is equitable. And we need the Coast Guard with the Marines to be able to do that. And then you get to Amendment 5, which is the right to remain silent. Or after you're accused, you can shut your mouth and not get yourself in more trouble, is really what the Fifth Amendment says, which means the right to be indicted. So that's what's coming, but we need due process of law under Admiralty.
So Kelly brought up a point earlier, and one of the things that I've been talking about specifically is, why have we not seen all of the arrests? Because we know the arrests are coming. We know the arrest wars are coming, but the judicial branch has to be fixed because it is corrupted. And when it's full of corruption, if you don't clean the house, then whatever you're trying to do won't work. And so this is the point where we're at. And Kelly brought up a point earlier, and I'm going to let you talk about it, Kelly, because you did. So there were a little over 500,000 sealed indictments. Now there, how many, Kelly? You were looking up today.
I have a post all ready to go. I'm going to send it into the channel. But there is presently 629,288,000 sealed indictments.
And with those sealed indictments, how many, or how does that operate within the RICO?
So let's see. Indictments can range from naming one person to dozens or even hundreds in complex conspiracies or organized crime cases, provided the charges are properly supported by the probable cause. The purpose of sealed indictments, authorized under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E4, are kept secret to prevent suspects from fleeing or destroying evidence until they can be safely arrested. Sealed indictments are commonly used for multiple defendants in federal cases to ensure that all parties are apprehended simultaneously. And I've got a website here where you can check like your own state, how many there are, and I'm going to forward that into Telegram right now for everybody.
Okay, so there was wait, before you go there, I wanted to bring a remembrance. Last year there was an operation that took place that was very important. It was where they did a military training of an exercise that operated simultaneously at the same time in every time zone around the world, all at the same time. This was the preparation for the sealed indictments coming open, and that there are no getaways.
Right. So one thing that we have to remember, up until this point, we have had a civil, since 1969, we have had a civil federal system. Okay? However, according to our research, federal law must be enforced by Admiralty and the Coast Guard. And the Marine Corps Sea Division is the mechanism of force for Admiralty courts. So what we're talking about is actually what we already were talking about. The new federal system, the new U.S. federal, not this foreign World Health Organization, Federated States of Micronesia, garbage dumpster, whatever we had, the new U.S. federal system will be enforced under Admiralty by the U.S. Coast Guard with the Marine Corps. So what I found out, and what I found out today, is I got a note. Somebody sent me a link. They made an announcement that that the intelligence, they said intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance is now assisting ICE or U.S. Customs and Border Protection. I got a notice that said that, right? Well, intelligence is Army, surveillance is Air Force, and reconnaissance is Marine Force Recon. When you put them together, you get the Army Air Corps. The Army Air Corps is now working with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Tom Holman just said that they have taken ICE and put it under U.S. Customs and Border Protection, nationalizing ICE, that now they are under the Army Air Corps. So this is all falling into place about the return of the Army Air Corps, the setting up of our national law enforcement system, right? Our nationalizing of law enforcement, because in reality, what we really need was, so we're trying to figure out how does this structure correctly. If we structure it correctly, law enforcement will be nationalized. Okay? Healthcare will be, I hate to say communized, but community structured, right? So healthcare will be administered at the community level. Law enforcement will be nationalized, right? And then trade will be globalized. So we operate under a global trade system, a community healthcare system, and a national law enforcement system.
So let me stop right there and kind of take that to a understanding for people, right? So right now, there's a difference between policing and law enforcement. And that has been something that people have been word salad together.
Yep.
But
Yep.
a police officer is not what you consider a law enforcement officer. They are corporate and they are policy enforcers. That's what police
No.
actually stands for.
No. It's the opposite. The sheriff is the corporate in servant. The police are actually the provincial officer for law, immigration, customs enforcement.
No, I'm saying right now that is how it is
Oh,
because they work for
right
the.
now, you're correct. Yes,
Yes,
yes, you
that's
are.
what I'm
Yes,
talking about.
you're right.
Not where
Yeah,
we're going, but where we're at right now.
right.
Because see, that's where
Yes,
your sheriff was the one that's an elected official. You have your police, which are basically they work for the cities, which are all corporate. They don't work for the
right,
public. It's all a bunch of bullshit, and that's why
right,
they police policing for money, which is ticketing and all this other crap. With
yep,
it's just because they are not able to make laws. Why? Because they're corporate. They're corporation. Corporations, by the Supreme Court, said no corporation can make or pass laws. They can only make policies and procedures. And how do we
right.
fall into those? Through our fucking straw man. That's how we got caught up into this by our driver's license and all their other crap, right? So
Well, our public
the
status.
correction,
Yes.
the correction that's coming is what you were talking about. I was talking about the way it is to
Yep.
where people see it right now, right? And this is what needs to be corrected to what you just said. Now, say that again, because what I was talking about is what people see right now and has been, which is back asswards, where people think
Right.
that they're law enforcement. They're not. They're policing agents, which they police freaking policies. That's why it's all these codes and everything else. It's all bullshit. So speak to them about where we're going and why that matters.
Right. Where we're going is a what's the word? Like a more linear style law enforcement mechanism, with the police being moved back to the provinces, provincial officer for law, immigration, customs enforcement, police. That's why we have military police. We do not have military sheriffs. Okay? There are military police because they are supposed to be attached to the National Guard, attached to the military, and ultimately attached to United States Marine Corps Division Maine, which is our highest form of law enforcement inside the United States. The sheriffs are supposed to be policy. So the sheriff is what's called a policy referee. They are the Shire's referee, which means they sit in the boardroom and they are with the magi, or the sheep shearers, and they're the ones that weigh and measure the wool that comes off the sheep when they're sheared in the boardroom, and they're called a referee. Okay, so they're the Shire referee, or they weigh the wool that comes off the sheep so that it can be sold. So we have it backward. We literally have it
Yes,
reversed.
it's completely opposite. And this is where, because
Right.
like right now, your police, they can't call in the National Guard, but your sheriff, they can call in the fucking National Guard. As it is right
Right.
now, everything is back asswards. Everything that's left is right, right is left, up is down, down is up. And it was all
Right.
intentional to
Yep.
confuse and back asswards everything.
So
And
sheriffs
nobody
are
wants to
supposed to be
figure out any of
municipal.
this.
Right. So sheriffs are supposed to be municipal. Sheriffs are supposed to be with the county. Police are supposed to be metropolitan. Okay. And so the police are supposed to be metropolitan, and they are supposed to be territorial or provincial, because they're on the land or they're in the province, and then it upgrades from the province to the nation, or the colony to the nation, right? And that's where you get to your Marine Corps and your higher levels of domestic law enforcement on the trust side, not on the profit, not on the maritime side.
So now that would make sense why last year and the year before that the military actually started doing actual coordinated training with the National Guard and with the police officers, and they were doing this in the background, so to speak, where they were having these training exercises where the police were actually policing and doing training operations with the military. I talked about this. Remember, Kelly, a couple of
Yep.
years ago, multiple times, and even through last year, that they were actually doing training for this specific time. That when there becomes a potentiality for martial law and the military's on the streets, well, you're going to have both the police and the military working together simultaneously under that operation within the public space until we can go back to a civil leadership and law, because we're going to be under martial law while they're actually doing the transition. And if you had just military out there on the streets, it's going to be a little frightening for people that aren't understanding what's going on. But when you have both the police and the military working together side by side, it de-escalates the threat to the people, so to speak. And that was where that was first brought up. But now when you're saying that the police are supposed to be actually working with the military and the military jurisdiction, now it even makes more sense why I saw that actually happening then, preparing for what's to come.
And Captain,
Well,
I have a quick question. Would that be why these blue states are trying to get these police to go against, like the ICE, and not work with them?
Yes, but it's more about trying to actually, they're being pushed into the exposure of their sedition, because they actually were going to operate under the Podesta plan, which was they were going to form an alliance to create civil war. And in doing that, they're being forced to be pushed out into the public arena, doing those very things under a controlled measure. That's what exposes that corruption to the public, right? Not only
right.
the corruption, but the political corruption, and that what their intent was, and to try to turn the police and even the National Guard against the military or federal agents. You can't fucking do that. It's just, you have a supremacy clause that doesn't allow it. And for them to be able to try to operate in that just shows how far that left craziness has actually pushed people to become useful idiots. Why do you think that it's only happening in a controlled measure in certain areas before it actually breaks off into every area? Because they want to show complete exposure of it, and it's not happening everywhere else. Why is it not? Because it's being done in a controlled measure. Even if it appears out of control, you're getting order that's coming from chaos. It's intentional.
Right. And the biggest thing that we have to remember, a lot of these mayors and a lot of these governors that are not privy to what's really happening, they are still under the delusion that they are in charge of the territory for which their state is on, not realizing that the territory part, the provincial territory of their state, has been moved to a completely separate jurisdiction away from the governor, who is a revenue based manager, to facilitate profits for the state. They are not a territorial mechanism. And that's stuff that happened after the Civil War, when they got rid of the state presidents and they merged the state president and the National Guard under the governor so they could profit. And then in the early 1900s, they incorporated all the National Guards. Well, because the National Guards have been separated, they're no longer funded by the state. They're actually funded out of their territorial provincial jurisdiction, and their funds are coming away from the governors themselves. So the National Guards are not incorporated anymore. They're not. They shouldn't be, and they shouldn't be taking directions from a for-profit governor or a mayor. That is completely outside how our system was set up. That's why we had a separation of powers. Civil War, Reconstruction is what screwed all that up. And ultimately we lost the state presidents. Now we're going back to that system.
Yeah, and it's all a process of us being able to bring that back into fruition.
Right.
So,
Makes sense?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Interestingly enough, when I figured out where the only sea base where the Marines and the Coast Guard work together, because you have to go there to like pick up that jurisdiction, I had to go to Summerlin Key, and then I had to proceed from Summerlin Key all the way to Fulton County, Georgia, at Union City, and then I had to work my way back, and I ultimately got back 2 days ago. The interesting part was, so I was actually at the warehouse in Fulton County where Tulsi Gabbard was, where they took all the election stuff. I actually had to go to that warehouse. What's interesting is I just got a thing that popped up that the military with the FBI and ICE have now gone after a full, I don't know how true it is, I haven't verified it, but apparently they went after a judge in Fulton County, and they raided the Fulton County courthouse. I don't know if you've heard about that, but from what I understand, there were 127 cases or something, or 156 cases that were bought and paid for, and it totaled $127 million in fraud that this judge had actually issued out of Fulton County, which was in Union City in Fulton County, Georgia. So that means that national intelligence has now moved into a city in a county.
So there's other parts that go into that as well. Why Tulsi Gabbard was actually there.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that's huge.
Yes,
Are
It is
going
huge.
into a county.
So
The entire purpose of. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so let me tie this in, because this actually ties into why we actually have Maduro in custody, and the Smartmatic systems, as well as the Dominion systems that were tied into a raid that was done by those systems in Puerto Rico last year by the intelligence, national intelligence, by her, and they actually reported on this specifically. And then it was important because national security comes into something that is a national thing, meaning outside of the United States jurisdiction, not just within the United States itself. That's a federal thing. That's a FBI thing. Well, when she came into the actual play and was pictured there specifically on that on purpose, right? That showed that it was not just a local jurisdiction, wasn't an American jurisdiction. This was an international jurisdiction, which meant that it was actually important that there was interference with the election internationally.
Foreign, which is
This is what made it very important. So continue with you're part of this because this is what I know to be a fact. And then this is another part of the puzzle, right? So it's all these different pieces bring
Right.
all this together. So go ahead.
So the key on our side, right? We're not really worried about the election. We're not paying attention to that, right? We're trying to create this bridge to get posse comitatus overridden and get them where we have a unified law enforcement mechanism, right?
Right.
That can actually do its job. So it's important because Tulsi Gabbard, right, was on the ground in Fulton County. In the county, that's a local jurisdiction, right? That overrides all home rule charters, that overrides all that, right? Number 2, the facility was it was called the Election Hub and Operations Center, okay? Which puts it in central jurisdiction, all right? That's CIA, NSA, military intelligence, okay? The facility was not a warehouse. The facility is a trucking distribution center, like a 100-bay trucking warehouse is what it actually is, which is why it's in central jurisdiction. If anybody's paid attention to all of these storage facilities going up all over the place and all of these huge distribution centers going up all over the place with no tractor trailers, brand new distribution centers, that is where this stuff is actually going to go down. That is what those things are being put in for. That's why they're being put in. Okay? So she's in a county, and she's not in a city, she's in a county, which means that national jurisdiction has gone to the local level.
Yes.
What we're trying to do is get that national jurisdiction to go from where they are, where they were able to go. We want to meet them there, and then we want to create a path to Charlotte County. Okay? Because that's where we've built this this 3-prong hub in 3 different counties in this whole area to be able to split them up and put them where they need to be, though back to the way it was supposed to be prior to everything that happened when CSX Railroad and all that stuff happened. So we're trying to get that, but we needed them to get to the local level so that we can then bring them to a new county. And from that new county, they'll create a hub, and then they'll be able to disperse all over the North American continent now that they're at that level. And that's how this stuff works. But if they don't have a line, if they don't have a connection to get them there, they can only come so far.
Robert, I'm confused. What are the facilities being put up for exactly?
That's where they're going to process all these hearings, all this stuff. That's where they're going to keep all the records, all the court documents of all the indictments and all that other stuff. But they have to be in a certain jurisdiction. These distribution centers are where all that stuff's going to happen. That's where basically the cargo is not going to be freight anymore.
So I understand that, and it's difficult, and don't beat yourself up if you don't understand a lot of the terminology that's being used here, and about trying to figure out all this word salad, because that's what it is. It's a word salad on purpose. They never intended for anybody to ever figure out any of this crap and to dig
Right.
it out. This was all intentional. And so when you actually started to enact laws where you had to have representation, because laws are supposed to be to where everybody supposed to be able to understand them. It's supposed to be common and very, very simple language. Well, that was intentional to break all this up into just where it's so complex that people can't understand it. It's the same thing that they did with the financial system. They've done it with everything. And it's like, well, whenever you start talking about how does the financial system work and how does inflation work and all this other stuff. And it's like, oh, it's all these figures and no, you can't figure it all out. And it's like, it was all intentional to
Right.
keep people from ever being able to figure out any of it. And so once the connections are made, things are brought back to alignment that they're supposed to be, then there will be a clarification of a simple transition of this is what this is for, this is how this works, and this is it. It's going to be real easy to be able to understand it after it's all put back together and operating the way it's supposed to be, because it's not supposed to be complex to where everybody can't figure it out. But this is
Right.
important that once it gets all put back into the proper jurisdictions and the alignments are all made, then it can be easily mapped out in a very simplistic terminology for anybody and everybody to be able to understand it. That's the whole point in this. And so this is why it's important for us to figure these things out, work with the powers to be, so that there can be a coming together, just like we talked about for months and months, that these things are coming together. And as they do, sooner or later, the right people are going to be in the right places and they're all going to be in the right room together and it's going to be done. And that's what
And I
we're
would say
working.
that's sooner than later. Honestly.
Absolutely. You
I don't
remember
think
I
we're
told
far
you
off.
this from the very beginning because you didn't know where this was going. I had the opposite where I was coming from the down, you were coming from the, coming up, and I was going the other way with what I knew, and that these things are going to merge together, and that's where they're at today. We didn't know how they were going to get there, but we knew they were going to come together in that way, and that's
Yeah.
where we're at today, right?
Yeah, and listen, the biggest thing when you start wrapping your mind around the fact that you need the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard to be together to get an Admiralty court, like that is completely outside the bounds of everything we know about how we've applied anything. Did I lose you?
No, I was
Okay.
taking a drink of my coffee
Oh,
and kind of went up my nose. The Yeah, because
so
it's like whenever you talk with it, it's like they would talk about admiralty, court, and maritime law, but it wasn't admiralty. It was actually all maritime because
right,
admiralty had been kicked to the curb a long time ago. Even though they said it was admiralty law, there was no
it never
admiralty
was.
jurisdiction for it to operate in.
Right, because you couldn't get the Marine Corps onto a cutter. Now, here's what's interesting. Do you know why they call it a Coast Guard cutter?
No.
This is fascinating. The reason that it's called a cutter is because the Coast Guard is who liquefies U.S. Treasury securities and turns them into new paper. Remember how Trump had said that there were social security numbers going back to like the early 1800s?
Oh, 200 years.
That's right. But think about this. Wait a minute. Hold on. Think about this. Social Security was not established until the 1900s. So how did a social security number make it all the way back 200 years if it was not established till the what, early to mid 1900s? Because when you pull it off of a trust, it has an identifier. When you move it to a new trust, even if it's 200 years old, you're still going to give it the same type of sequence numbers in your new vault where you moved it to. So it could be 200 years old and it still could have a social security number because it's an account number. Okay? Only the Coast Guard, when the Coast Guard and the Marines are put together, they create Admiralty. When they come together and they go inside the U.S. Treasury building, they can now cut the actual Treasury securities, liquefying them into new paper under a new currency so that they can be dispersed. And that's why they call it a Coast Guard cutter.
So that would be why, even though it has already been kind of done, why we've been waiting on the Treasury Department and the financial system to um, come out with
Yep.
the new digital currency, as well as the new Treasury bills, Treasury
Yep.
notes, and all of that. Because even with the financial system being appropriated, until we actually have the proper jurisdiction to come in and do that specific thing to get
And
rid of the
liquefy.
gold and to bring forth the liquidity of the new
Yep.
system, it couldn't
Yep.
happen. And that's where we're at
Correct.
today. So that would mean that we're on the horizon of the ability for the financial system to actually change.
Right. So technically what should happen is the Secret Service, which is a birth child of the Confederacy that was used in the Civil War to devalue Union currency out of Canada through a Canadian bank, should be moved to the Federal Reserve building, and the Coast Guard and Marine Sea Division should come together at the Treasury building. And when they come together and they have the cutter and the water, and they can go to the outer banks on the sea and get the outer bank, they can now liquefy the securities, putting them into new paper so that
And
they can go be dispersed in their proper channel.
make it liquid.
Yep. But
And
only
that's
the
how,
Coast Guard with the Marines
yeah.
together can actually do it as the two of by sea.
Yeah. So that makes
Yep.
more sense why these things have to be in place before that could actually happen, even though it's already been prepared, all that's been done. But until it
Right.
actually gets formal jurisdictional grounds for it to happen, it's still in limbo.
Right.
That doesn't mean that
And
all
they
of the
and it has
mechanisms are there, because you got to do everything first. It's kind of like do
right. You
put
prep
everything
it
in place. But that's the thing that pulls the lever to make it all work, right?
because it can
And
only
that,
happen at Admiralty. It can
yeah.
only happen at Admiralty, which means you need an Admiralty court to do it.
So now all these people are like, what are they waiting for? What are they waiting for? We've been talking about this
They're
forever.
waiting for
On gold and the science. Well, you can't put the cart before the horse, and everything has to be in place to be able to be done. But there has to be something that is what is the activating point of being able to pull the lever to make the switch and to make it lawfully.
Yep.
Yeah,
They
go
need
ahead,
a-
Robert. What were you going to say?
They need a international American sea base at Admiralty, where it puts the Marine Corps Sea Division with the Coast Guard, and that is who's been granted housing and quarters and assistance. And once that happens, now they can start to liquefy those securities.
So I have a question about, with people saying, when is this going to happen? Why is everything taking so long about, the arrest, the indictments? When I was doing a little research on tribunals, it said that it was very rare for civilians to be tried in tribunals. And they mentioned, let's see, civilians being unlawful enemy combatants, violations of laws of war. Would that be the case in a lot of these instances where these people have committed treason?
They are going to be, if I understand this correctly, they will be prosecuted under international human rights law at the laws of war for war
Yeah,
crimes.
that those were one of the very rare cases they said that could happen. Civilians could be tried.
That will be the common case, because their acts were acts of war, and it was a clandestine act of war, and it doesn't matter whether they knew or not. It doesn't matter if you're so dumb you don't know the difference between right and wrong, then it doesn't matter anyways. You're not getting prosecuted because we're going to change you. We're being prosecuted to send a message to everybody who comes behind you. Your ass is just the trophy. So whether you knew or you didn't know, if you don't know the difference between right and wrong, that's your problem. It's not our problem. It was our problem. We solved the problem. You're the problem.
So it was like
civilians.
So like
Go
in
ahead.
that intro, where in the intro Trump said when you make an example of somebody, it's not to make the example of that person. It's for everyone else to know that you can never do this.
That's right. You're going to send a message to everyone who comes behind you. We're going to use your ass as the trophy, and you will be the trophy to put on display for everyone else that comes behind you to understand what happens when you pull the same shit. And that's what this is about. We already know that these people are arrogant, ignorant, egotistical. They think that they are gods. They think that they're control everything. They think all this stuff. And they will recklessly, malfeasantly disregard any form of lawful action or right or wrong. They've already proven that. They've already proven their capacity to disregard all of it. So now they're just trophies. That's what we're going to use them for. They have no other value in our society except to be a trophy.
So, hey, I got this video real quick, and I didn't know why I pulled it up. I pulled it up last night. I thought I might use it last night, and I had it still pulled up. But it's perfect for right now because of the arrogance that you're talking about, right? And you're going to see it. And it's coming from Bill Maher talking about QAnon and about the conspiracy, and who do we go to for? I just let him say it for himself. It's just fucking great.
Yeah.
So I know that's why
the term is willful and wanton reckless disregard of the law. Period.
Yeah. So here we go. It's perfect for exactly what we were just talking about, and about their arrogance and thinking that they would never get caught and they would never go down. They all used their own names and shit. They didn't even try to hide it.
That's because they're too dumb. They actually think that's the way things work.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but where does QAnon go for the apology? QAnon, which believed in lots of really ridiculous things, like, Democrats eat babies.
Yeah.
But they were kind of harping a lot on the idea that the elites are running this pedophile ring. And I made jokes about them. I also made jokes after the Epstein thing happened originally that were on the idea of, obviously there was some smoke there. Well, now with all that's come out in the last couple of weeks, there's a little more than smoke. It does look like anybody who was at all able to get in touch with Jeffrey Epstein, he was the man.
We're doing it.
They just, yeah. And then they all lied about it. Everybody has, and the arrogance also of thinking they could just use their real name in an email, which they did, and didn't try to couch it in, when I used to get pot before it was legal, it was like, I'd like 2 shirts, please, and no seeds in the shirts this time. You had to sort of codify it. No, they're just openly talking in emails about this sort of, sexual perversion, and that they were all doing, and lots of people who you didn't think, or I never imagined were doing it. I see these names come up. QAnon, yes, a lot of crazy there, but you know what? You weren't totally wrong about that,
You know-
guys.
You weren't totally wrong. Well, that means you were
and
right.
you've been proven more right, more so than the entire time. It's just when do y'all finally get caught up with what we've actually been telling you for years, right? And that's the kind of thing. It's like, where do we go to get our apology? Because none of you fuckers are planning on giving it to us.
Well, I'm going to say this for me, okay? For the 19 individuals that are stockpiled up, we are so far past apology. We are
Oh
beyond
God,
apology.
yeah.
Apology is off the table. Trust me.
It would just
It is not an apology I'm looking for. We
no,
are
it's not.
past
But
that.
you know what's funny is that's from Stephen Smith and Bill Maher, two of the biggest freaking Democratic voices that are out there. That's telling the public we were right, and
Yep.
that maybe you might start listening to some more of that stuff. Talking about not that he's not talking to us. He's talking to them. He's talking to the people that are
Yeah.
still lost in Lululand, right? And that's the thing is that I told people this a long time ago. The only way people are going to wake up is when they hear it from the people that kept them asleep. And that's what that's doing, right?
Yeah. He's turning the corner. He's going, man, you guys weren't wrong. Like you were, but if you weren't wrong, you were right. Okay. So
Exactly.
now you weren't completely right because you didn't have all the data, but you were right. You were right about what was going on. You weren't a conspiracy theorist. You weren't crazy. You weren't any of that other crap. You were right. These people are douchebags, and they need to
Yeah,
get everything that's coming to them. All of them. Nobody's getting out. Nobody's getting away. That's how this is going down.
absolutely. All right, Kelly, you got some questions for Robert?
I'm sure we do.
I'm sure you do.
Okay, let's get in here. Okay, so if Hillary thing shows up for her deposition, will they actually have a double go in there, or will they just show us footage of her being interviewed for Gitmo?
Well, in my opinion, you're not going to see with this whole thing with calling Hillary in to Congress and all this stuff. That's all that all has stuff to do with maritime law under like that has nothing to do with the hammer down. It's probably more than likely that some of these quote unquote elected politicians are trying to save some kind of face because they had her back before and now they're trying to cover it with saving face saying, no, we called her in and we asked these hard questions. And we're so far past that. It doesn't matter what that she's going to get prosecuted under military law.
Oh,
That's where
absolutely.
the real thing's going to happen.
And this
So
is
I
all for
wouldn't worry
show.
about that's all show stuff. Who cares who shows up? Who
It's
cares what
about the
she says?
public. Yeah, it's all about the public and the public show. And they're not going
Right.
before Congress. They're actually going to do a deposition. In a deposition, they can just, it's not like where you have to go back and forth between, 3 minutes with a Republican and 3 minutes with a just Democrat, and they ask questions back and forth, back and forth. It's not like that at all. We're going to do a videotaped deposition where we ask questions, you answer them, you're answering them under the perjury law. And so that's where it's all for show. It's just an accountability. It's for the record. That's all it's for.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Frankly speaking, asks, how does Robert know where to go and do the things he is describing?
That's a great question. The answer would be a lot of research and a lot of extrapolation of understanding how the system works, and that the system's not set up randomly. So being able to see the connections and then try to locate where those connections actually exist, and being able to go to those places, like and a lot of this stuff is some of it's intuition, but some of it just gets revealed through certain mechanisms, conversations. It so happens that I came in contact with some gentlemen that all have their Twix cards. They all want to be operating under a letter of marque. They all want to become pirates. So they're they're grouped up, and it so happens that one of them, his son, actually participated in this facility down the Keys when he was in the Boy Scouts for a number of years. So they had inside detailed information about how that facility works, who's there, and they were able to relay that. And I was able to put it together and realize, holy shit, this is where they parked the Coast Guard and the Marines together. That's where they put them. So being able to put and like I said, it just so happens that I came in contact with these people, and they had this detailed knowledge that I would have never had I not had this conversation with them.
And it was some trial and error, and not only
Yeah,
trial and
absolutely.
error,
It's
but
always trial and error.
and as Robert and myself, and we were talking through these things, we were going down this path that it was always about moving forward. And as you move forward, then that allows God to direct your steps, and for those powers to actually put things in place so that you run into them at the right time. It's very important that those things actually
And
happen.
understand something. When I say the word intuition, that intuition is that supernatural guidance that facilitates me making decisions when I have to rely on that and being guided to make the right decision. So when I say intuition, that's really what I'm saying. Because without that guidance, I would not be able to make the right decision.
And you can't have your steps ordered or directed when you're sitting on your couch. You have to be moving.
You got to be moving.
Okay. Let's see the next question here. Robert, do the lower courts and lawyers know that we are going back to common law, or are they going to be surprised?
I think that I think Capt and I have talked about this before. There are people that have been vetted. They have probably been put under some kind of security clearance, and they know what's coming, and they have been strategically placed. So when that mechanism turns on, they will move into those positions. There are people out there that are in these courts, these judges, these attorneys. They have no idea what's coming, and it's going to hit them like a loaded freight train. So
And it's meant to.
And it's meant to. I've said this before. I'm pretty sure that OSS or military intelligence or CIA or whoever, they have been preparing for this moment for upwards of 70 years, waiting for this event, and they have worked things to make sure that when this moment happens, that everything, or not everything, but at least the majority of things, that switch is able to be turned on with the least amount of unstable chaos to the public as possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Will national law enforcement be a return to common law?
national law enforcement will facilitate the return to common law. It won't be the return. It will set the anchor or the platform for then the temple to be built on top of that, with that level of security and force, so that it can be built. Because this thing's like a set of stairs. Like, you got to build one layer, then you can't go to Admiralty until you get Maritime in, and you can't go to Equity until you get Admiralty in, and you can't. This thing is like steps, like one level plane after one platform after another, stacking on each other.
Okay. Where do highway officers fit into this?
You mean, well, if you're talking about state troopers, troopers are actually constitutional territorial state officers. They are right now being used as commercial inspectors, but in reality, in an emergency with an incident, they transfer to the adjutant general for the National Guard. And they are operating under the governor in his presidential state powers. So they are technically constitutional officers, the closest thing to a U.S. Marine that you would find in the public.
So, because you got like constables and all these other different ones, right? And they're all going to have their own place within this construct, right?
Right.
Okay. If banks hold certificates for the whales and those whales want their weight back in their hands and not dollars, and the vaults are a little light, would this be cause a collapse or another bailout for EO 6102?
So they wouldn't do, they're not going to do another bailout. It would be a bail-in.
No.
And that would be intentional because they did that specifically after 2008 when they got the bailout. They actually wrote the laws that changed to that they weren't going to get a bailout again, that they would actually bail in. And bail in means that they take the depositors' money to actually cover their corrupt losses. Well, that whole thing is why the quantum system is in place right now, is a trap to catch them doing the nefarious things. All of that money is secured. Why? Because they already have the funds that are in the quadrillions, that you're not going to lose your money. You may appear to have lost your money intentionally by their corruption, but it's all been tracked. It's all been accounted for. That's where you don't have to be concerned in the long run, only in the short term that you may be in difficulties because of the bank's closing. Why? Because you're doing business as a person in a commercial bank. You should never have been in Bank of America or Wells Fargo. Those are tier one commercial banks. You should not be doing personal banking out of a tier one commercial bank. It's all got to be corrected. We should be operating in a local bank or a credit union, which is a member-based bank that's for the person, not the business. And so that all has to be corrected. And it will be all corrected in this transition. That's what Robert was talking about, when they can actually bring liquid to the new system. But until then, it's just there. We can't lawfully do it. You can do it by, nefarious means, but it doesn't mean that it's been done lawfully. And that's what Trump is doing. Everything by the book. Everything is by law and order. And because of that, you have to go through the process of this transition correctly, not just by force, not by that we've got the biggest stick and that we're going to say it's going to be this way and it's going to be that way, because you could do it that way, but it doesn't make it lawful and it doesn't make it right. But it doesn't mean you can't do it that way. But that's not the right way to actually do anything.
Well, and also that causes a ripple effect through the system that
Yes.
then detaches other parts that are supposed to be operating, and it causes a mess. That's a lot of what's happened in this compartmentalized system, where they put all these brakes in so that they can steer things a different direction
Yeah.
and basically rechannel, where this stuff goes. And it was channeling through NGOs, which were foreign, and then
Yeah.
it was coming back, but they were getting their processing fees and all their stuff. That's really what's happened. Now the system is becoming unified and linear, where you get to see that you can see, like, okay, it went to here, then it went to here, then it went to here, and it's at most 6 steps to get to where it has to go at the lowest level, which is the way it should be.
Yeah, and so that's a lot of the reason that you're seeing all these organizations like the UN and the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and the World Health Organization. All that bullshit is being subverted right now into actually correct
Outcasted, just straight up
operation.
outcasted. Like, see ya,
Yes.
we're going to a new
That's
system.
why
Bye.
that's why Trump is doing what he's doing by disassociating with all of these organizations and basically making them null and void in their own operating space.
Right. They can keep their space. We just don't want to talk to them anymore.
And what do you got without us? Nothing.
Right.
Have a nice
Nothing.
day.
Bye. We're no longer going to participate. See you later.
Yeah, we're taking our ball and going home.
Right. Right. Or we'll find a new court. See you later.
Yeah. All right, Kelly, let's do a couple more.
Is that why Fort Knox is being rebuilt and fortified?
I didn't know it was.
That answer.
I didn't know it was.
Yeah, I don't know that answer, but I know that there is another treasury and depository, and it's not where people think it is. It's in Texas. You can actually look it up. It's actually where they talk about gold reserves actually in the state of Texas, as well as the state of Texas is actually about to open its own stock market. Look it up.
I think all that stuff goes back to the Permian Basin.
It does.
And yeah, and liquid gold and all that stuff goes back to West Texas and the Permian Basin, and all that stuff is where that jurisdiction is. That's probably where a lot of that stuff's going to happen.
Okay. Somebody wants to know, where is the Coast Guard stationed in Summerland? They have never seen it. I guess they're familiar with that area.
It's called the Brinton Center, BSA Sea Base. It's on the far west side. It's right before you leave Summerlin and you head to you're heading towards Key West.
So didn't you have a picture of where the lighthouse is and all that other stuff one time that you showed?
That's on Boca Grande.
Okay. All right.
That's the Gasparilla Lighthouse, because there's 2 lighthouses on Boca Grande.
Right.
Gasparilla Island and Boca Grande Pass, right? So the Gasparilla Lighthouse is halfway up. That's the pictures you saw. The
Right.
Boca Grande Pass Lighthouse is at the end of the island, and that's the pass that takes you into Charlotte Harbor.
Gotcha. I understand.
So what happens, it's supposed to happen, you know this, when the ship shows up at the mouth of the pass, the Coast Guard is supposed to go set the perimeter around the ship to escort the ship into the pass, allowing it into the harbor, right? That's how it works?
Safe harbor,
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, because you're changing the law jurisdiction, and the naval ship or whatever ship has to be escorted by the Coast Guard in, because that's their jurisdiction.
And so they
whenever
don't
they're
do
in
that
harbor,
now. So they don't do that now because it's been fucked up. They actually do it with the harbor master and with a
yep,
uh, oh god, the captains for the bring them in.
yep,
I'm trying to
the
think.
tug masters or something.
No, no, no. That's the boats, but the harbor master, and you have the kind of, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's it's where the captain gets aboard. He's the expert in bringing them into port. You can't bring a ship into port without one. It's illegal to.
Right,
Um,
right. So
and
in
it,
this case, when we go back, it'll be the Coast Guard that actually does that again, the way it's supposed to be. The harbor masters will handle the dock, but they will not handle the actual security of the vessels. I know what you're talking about. They switch out the captains, or
yeah,
they
well, the
like they
captain is
get a
never.
guide. It's like a guide. It's like your
Yes, and
guide that
he is the
brings you through the
legal
channel.
aspect to represent bringing that aboard into port. And I swear I just drew a fucking blank. Sorry, people. It's just and it's like the thing of that is that the master never gives up his control of the ship. He only gives directions on where and how to bring it ashore. And you
Right.
cannot bring it ashore without that person on board. And I swear I can't think of the freaking name of it.
But all that stuff's been under the Navy, under maritime, for all
Yeah.
these years. Now it's going back to Admiralty, and it's going to be back with the Coast Guard and the Marines.
Okay, here's another question from Lady Free. How does our new system of trust help the lands of Indigenous people? Going back to letters U or C, I guess Robert Kraft sent to Canada natives.
We are still waiting on them to get organized. Those letters are for them and their tribal lands to actually be able to claim ground rights and receive the benefits of ground rights. They have not gotten their stuff together. So I'm still waiting on those. And from what I understand, a lot of the letters were intercepted and never actually reached the tribe they were supposed to go to. So we're trying to figure out how to get around that.
So here's another
Because
one
they're being
about
blocked.
Canada. Caree says, so if it's going to be provinces and territories, does that mean Canada is set up correctly to be annexed?
No, because Canada doesn't have states.
So what's going on with Alberta? They're trying to separate from Canada, correct?
Well, they're trying to separate from the federated government of Canada. They're not separating from Canada. They're dividing their federated state side from their actual territorial provincial side. And that's the separation.
Is that kind of like how Australia has that West state that is run separately?
I don't know. But I can tell you that's what we're doing.
Is that the kind of the same situation? Captain?
What's that?
You know, Alberta wants to separate from the federal government, correct?
Yeah, so basically that's the same thing as like, Texas wanting to succeed away from the United States. They're doing the same thing. It's all a part of the show, basically. And it's showing the people of Canada the bureaucracy and the criminality of their government system, that it's all basically all about Quebec, and it doesn't give a shit about the rest of the country other than what they're funding to the criminals that are there in Quebec, right? And it's basically the same thing. United States, it was all about the people in the United States being fleeced by what? DC, the criminal act of DC. Same thing.
And the
And
NGOs.
yes, and so it's just they're just showing the Canadians the same part of that, but it's all part of the United States and the Northern Territory. So they're all going to become one as anyway, eventually. And it's just a part of the process on how you bring people into the fact that how do we come together as one and not these fictitious boundaries that were created by what? The crown.
Britain.
Yes. So the
And the railroad,
pilots are what
and the railroad
work
companies.
with so it's the pilots that are working with the harbor master that you can't go
Oh,
inland
the pilots.
without a pilot on board, right?
Right.
That's the official thing. Don't know why I
Okay.
just drew a freaking blank, but that's that process, right? You can't lawfully or legally bring a ship ashore without having a pilot on board. Who's that? That's the guy that's basically there to give you the directions that you need to safely come ashore. It's all bullshit.
Right. Right. Well, because the pilot knows the waters
Yes.
for which they're operating in, and the ship, when it comes off the sea, has to come into the waters. So it requires a pilot, no longer a captain, to guide them without running aground and make it in. And that's really this transition through the pass.
And you transition from pilot to pilot. So like if you come into like the Houston ship channel, you get a pilot that actually pilots it into the Galveston Bay area. Then you actually take it from Houston up into the actual Houston, or you have a pilot that takes it into Galveston, blah, blah, blah. Or if you come into like say the Atchafalaya River of in say Louisiana or like the Mississippi. There's places that they have their pilots licensed for specifically this jurisdictional piece of waters.
Right.
And then you pass
Right.
it over to another and you pass it over to another wherever they're operating through. And so
Right, because that's
and
that's their specialty that they cover. That's their part of the river, and it's always
yep,
been like that.
yep.
Okay, and that way you keep it moving. So we have to start looking at it in this construct of now that we know how important the Coast Guard is, because if you've noticed in all of the time that I've talked, I have never mentioned the Coast Guard ever. I've never talked about them. I've never addressed them because I really didn't completely understand where they belonged, and I didn't understand what they were. Now that I understand, now I'm like, oh, this is how you go from maritime to admiralty, but you got to have the Marines. And then this falls into the whole thing about when the ship comes to the entrance of the mouth, you put a legal perimeter around it with the Coast Guard, and then with the pilot, and they go into the harbor, and they are guided by a specialist for that area so that they can get to their destination and unload their cargo. Because
Yes.
when you put it with the Coast Guard, it becomes cargo. It is no longer freight. Okay,
And
it
that's
is no
what's having to
longer
change with the
intermodal.
railroads.
Right.
That's what's
It's
having
no
to
longer
change with railroads.
intermodal, and it's no longer international, right? It's not no longer international modal. It's actually cargo.
Yeah. All right, Kelly, let's do one more, baby.
Okay. That woman about Canada, she said, "Thank you kindly for your answer. I do have a connection with a clan mother in Northeast. What can I tell her?" I guess this is about something you need from them.
Well, they need to get organized and come together. 22 letters went out, but somehow they got interventioned, or we're still trying to figure out what happened. We don't even know what happened. So, I can have her email me. Can you give her an email? Have her email me, and I'll forward it on to Angela, because that's kind of Angela's wheelhouse. She's handling that.
Yes, I can type it right here in the comments because that was from Rumble. Go ahead. Oh, you want to text it to me, Robert, or
no,
what?
no.
Say it.
It's Our United Republic at gmail.com. OUR.
Our United. Our United Republic at
gmail.com. Yeah. And I'll forward it to Angela, because she's coordinating all that stuff up in Canada, because, like I've said before, we've pretty much done a good job of understanding how U.S. law works, or constitutional law in the U.S. But when it comes to Canada, that is not our forte. We are not. They are structured differently.
It's because of the way that it was set up as a province of the crown, and trying to make it like it was a republic, but it wasn't. It was a freaking, it's like Australia. It's screwed up. Not that Australia
a lot of it
screwed
comes
up, but I'm talking about their system, where they actually
Right.
thought they had some kind of freedom with their parliament and everything else, but in reality, it was all a facade. Just like all of ours was just a facade. It was an illusion
Right.
of being free.
And a lot of it comes out of the way the Oregon Territory was split, and making that British Columbia was actually how they got through that gate and up in and did all that, because the Oregon Territory actually ran up into what is now British Columbia.
All right, Kelly, let's do one last question. You got one?
Yeah, I guess so. So if it's going to be provinces and territories, does that mean? Oh no, we already went over that one. All right, somebody's asking if they have over 250,000 in the bank. Should they worry about that?
Only if it's all in a single account. I wouldn't actually have it in a single account. If you put it in, so this is the thing.
I think it has to be in different banks, Captain, actually, not even accounts.
So it actually, where the insurance is per account. And so, and it can all be in the same bank, even. Just has to be in separate accounts. But the deal is that they don't have the money to actually even insure that. So they've been saying this for a while, but the thing is that this is the old system, not the new system, and you could actually lose that money for a period of time until we make the transition. But everything has been accounted for. Every penny, everything that you have has been tracked by the quantum system. You're not going to lose any of it, but you may think you lost it until that actually comes into formal existence and it's refunded. So is that a week? Is it a month? Or however? I don't know. And none of us know. I have my monies in the bank. I don't have it in, I've got it in bunches of different credit unions. I have multiple credit unions. I do not operate out of a tier one commercial bank. I don't have a single account there. I do still have all my monies in, I've got a lot of stocks. I've got a lot of stuff. I've got my brokerage account. I've got those things, but I'm not worried about it because it's all been accounted for. Trump's always told us that if your 401k, your retirement money, all those monies are safe. They may appear to disappear because of the corruption of the system, but Trump has always promised that the system's corruption is not going to take you down with it when they take them down. So a lot of times people are going to have to wake up because they lose their God, and their God is money. And until they don't have the money that they think that they have, then that's going to be the thing that finally wakes those people up, that nothing else would wake them up. Nothing. And
Yeah.
so are you going to go through a difficult time because of that? Maybe. But it won't be sustained through your bonds that they have, through your CISA account and everything else. You have more money than you know what to do with, but you don't yet because you're still operating under your straw man. So when your straw man disappears and you become sovereign, and we operate back in that system, which is coming, those monies will be then allocated back to you, but not under the fiat worthless paper that is all that is a illusion of currency, money, to actual real money, which is based on actually something of value, whether it be gold, silver, any kind of commodities, oil, diamonds, anything that's of actual sustained value. That's what actually will transition into, and then the monies that you have will be actually real. But
Captain,
until then, we're just playing with monopoly money.
here's a question, the last question that pertains to that. How do you end the Fed and not the country? Place setter electronic followed by gold, silver backed currency?
So the Fed
Well, they
was
didn't
already
end the Fed.
consumed
They
into
they
the
put they
treasury.
put the Fed under Treasury where it belongs. It's a pathway, but that's all it is. It's not in charge of anything. Treasury's in charge.
And
And
we know because they did that back in March. I think it was either March or May of 2020, and they did it under the emergency declaration of the pandemic. Trump was a freaking genius,
they announced
and
it in the
nobody
Rose
even got it.
Garden, right? With what was his name? The guy that was a producer.
Oh, Medushin.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so the whole
Yeah,
thing is an illusion right now, and it is to cripple and and break the financial system that is got its tentacles in every aspect of the planet, and that all has to be broken. And when that's all broken, then we can actually then stand up the new system, which is actually already operating. The quantum system has been operating parallel to the fiat system, Swift, since 2021. 100%. That's why you had all of these banks getting caught for money laundering and fraud and everything else. We're talking about Deutsche Bank and all these big Credit Suisse, these huge funding financial institutions that have never ever been in any kind of financial trouble, and they got all caught with they all got caught doing things they weren't supposed to, and they were a part of the
well,
club. If you're part of the club,
that's
you
what
don't
happens
get
when you
caught.
put stupid people in charge.
So yeah, but when you put a bunch of money in front of people, they're crooks. Well, guess what? They're gonna take it, and that's what
Yeah,
they did.
because they can't help themselves.
They can't help themselves, and that's what they did. And the deal is that on the old system, though, it could always be fudged on the books, but on the
Right,
quantum system, everything is allotted, everything's counted for. It's all blockchained, and everything cannot be fudged. And that's how you got caught. They got caught. Every one of them's been caught. Go back and look at
right.
all of the major
Well,
bank crimes that have been international and have been major things over the last 5 years, and it'll blow you away how many of them are between Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse. All of them have all been in trouble with financial malfeasance in the last five or
and that
6 years.
and that's a lot of reason why. Like with us, we're operating through Stripe, and we've been granted North American jurisdiction and all that stuff. So we're out of the Fed, and we're out of out of the federal government and all that other stuff. But whenever, like, someone was making a donation yesterday or today, and they asked me, he said, how do you want us to do it? Like, and I'm like, nope, we made an agreement with Stripe, with Treasury. Anything that comes through our system will come through our Stripe account, and it will be registered. There's no funds, there's no other accounts, there's no money going anywhere else. Everything's on the up and up. And that's why we did it that way, for that specific purpose. So it's all legit, it's all accounted for. No questions asked.
So yeah, we're on the verge of it all, and that piece of the Marines and the Coast Guard, and them being able to use the cutter and to do the things that they have to with the Treasury, all that now makes sense on the last piece of that jurisdictional part that has to be in place for the financial currency to then operate in a different vein. And so
we're planning on Monday putting that access point. We already have the space available. We have everything right where it's supposed to be. We just have to drop the access point in and then outline the mechanism that access point works with. And then once it's in, they should be able to move forward. We've done all the framing, and all the frame out work is already done. So hopefully
awesome.
Monday.
Awesome. Like I said, we're getting close, people. So
yeah,
a lot of shit's going to happen in the next 90 days to 120 days or so. So just don't get caught up in the noise, and don't get caught up in the chaos. Sit back and enjoy the journey that you're on right now, because that's what it is. So, Robert, it's been awesome. Kelly, great. And we will see you on Monday. We have a special show for Monday. Kelly's going to put something together for that, and I will see you guys on Monday. And Robert, have a great time. Give me a call. We'll
take care, everybody.
All right. Love you guys.
Good night, everyone.
And good night.
Bye.
Captain, I wanted to ask you something before you left.